department of the Seventh Adventist Church. And on the panel, I have the communication director of Uganda Union. We have a live audience, and very soon we'll come to you for questions that have not been included in this question lineup. We'll go to question number 5, that the SDA Church will basically, all members of this church are very, very, very critical when it comes to anything that is not, does not relate to something that, or does not have a baseline from the Bible. I want to ask you, is there a precedent in the Bible where, the Bible basically talks about the kind of diplomacy and church ambassadorship that we have to exhibit through the Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Department?
Okay. There is indeed precedence in the Bible. Maybe I'm going to mention one or two. And the first example is one of Daniel. If we look at Daniel, I would call him, allow me to call him an Adventist in context, because the kind of faith he believed in is the kind of faith that we are advancing today. He was taken into captivity in Babylon, and he finds himself in a heathen world, but he was able to remain an Adventist. He was able to remain true to the Hebrew faith, and he was able to be a true ambassador of Jesus Christ at that particular time. How did he do this? I need to mention 3 ways that we can relate within an Adventist world. You may be an Adventist, but you are relating with a heathen world or a world which is not having the same faith as you. But there are 3 things to look at. We can choose to relate this way. We can choose to practice isolation. What is isolation? Isolation is us coming up and saying, oh, we are the remnant. We are the true church. We are the only ones who know the truth. We need to keep away from the world. Ours is the heavenly kingdom. Let's not be engaged with the world there. We are not concerned about what is happening. And so we live in our own cocoon. Now, I don't think that is a good way to relate. But there's also a second way that we can choose to relate as we execute our diplomacy. We can decide to say, Jesus mingled with people. We need to mingle. We need to relate with people. And we need not be seen to be very different from people. If we are in a place where they are drinking, you can take a little bit of it. Don't take too much, so that we are with the world, You can run to the office, do a little bit of work by 9 on Sabbath, then you can at least go be there for divine service. Compromise a little bit to be like the rest of the world. Friends, I don't think that would be the right way. It is not good to practice isolation. It is also not good to practice delusion. When you do that, when you begin compromising because you want to fit with the world, you're compromising and you're diluting your faith. Now, we cannot relate that way. Jesus mingled with the sinners. He mingled with the worst of the people, but he remained Christ. He did not sin. He did not compromise. So we need to avoid that. Another way we can relate is to cooperate. When we cooperate, we appreciate that we are in a world. We appreciate that. Again, let me give an example of my uncle, Elder Matoya. You see, if he decides to say, I want to stick to the Adventist world, which means if some Hindu comes with a contract, he wants an architectural plan for his house, he needs an architectural engineer, I don't deal with Hindus, I am Adventist. Or Elder Mugisha, you have a shop, and when people say, show me your baptism certificate first before I sell you item from my shop. And then, in our neighborhoods, we live with non-Adventists in our neighborhoods. Maybe the road is bad, and your next neighbor is a Muslim, another one is a Catholic. Don't you think it is in order for you to sit down together and you say, can't we get a grader and we work on this road? So we cannot avoid to only deal with Adventists. But Even as you work with your neighbors to solve the problems that you have there, are you keeping your distinctness as an Adventist? Yes, you need to, because you shouldn't dilute. You shouldn't also isolate yourself. Work on matters that affect you, common matters that affect you, but you keep your faith. So we need to bear that in mind as we relate with the world. If we decide to go to the extreme, then we are not going to be able to do it. So with that in the background, let me give the examples of people who are able to do that in the Bible, and we can borrow a leaf from them. Daniel was in the heathen kingdom, in the Babylonian Empire. But you see, he receives an education at a top state university in Babylon, and he gets employed there. He becomes a great diplomat in the Oriental world for the Babylonian kingdom. But he did not forget that he was also a diplomat of Jesus Christ. When it came to eating the foods which were forbidden, he could not compromise on that. He did not do that. When it came to worshiping of image, compromising on the fact that it is only the true God who should be worshipped, we know the story of the Hebrew boys with whom Daniel went to the university and were serving. They did not compromise. But Daniel was a distinguished civil servant, a distinguished politician, a distinguished diplomat, and he was a senior presidential advisor to King Nebuchadnezzar, but he was not able to compromise even a little bit. In fact, if we go by what the Bible says, the last story about King Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel impacted Nebuchadnezzar well. Don't be surprised if we meet Nebuchadnezzar in heaven tomorrow, because Daniel did not compromise. If Daniel compromised, Nebuchadnezzar wouldn't have seen the Christ that Daniel stood for. So that is one example. Another example is Joseph. You know, Joseph was taken to Egypt, which is a heathen world, but he was able to keep his faith, so to say, as an Adventist. He was a Hebrew. He remained faithful. He did not compromise, even though he was imprisoned there, but he was vindicated by God. We see him becoming a prime minister in Egypt and doing a lot of things. And we remember him as having been successful, but without compromising. There are so many of our members who are at public institutions. Dr. Samson, for example, is in a state university. He has been he has been involved in even aeronautic engineering in Europe, developing planes, but he has still remained an Adventist, and they are faithful to their God as Adventists. So let's not look so far. I just gave the example from the Bible so that we can appreciate that we are not doing something which is unbiblical, and so we can do this. So we can work in the army. We can become politicians. For those who have become politicians, we cannot condemn you, but keep your faith. Be a real ambassador of Jesus Christ. So by observing the fact that you need not compromise, you can be able to execute the church diplomacy in the world.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that it's not a culture of clapping here, but please allow me to ask you to be flexible a little bit and clap for Elder.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a vote of appreciation, and also to make sure that the audience is nobody's is sleeping. Ladies and gentlemen, a little bit on this one for those of you viewing live on our Facebook page, SDA Mount Olives Church, our Facebook page, and the other channels. I want to thank you so much for following us. We are left with 3 questions to Aldo, who is Communication Director of Uganda Union, and we're live at Mount Olives Church, Nalia. There's an opportunity for young people who are dreaming big. When he was talking about, the opportunity that we are veiled to preach without saying a word under this department, he mentioned, of course, these names will always remain there until we challenge them. He mentioned Elder Matoya. He mentioned a number of people. I know a number of elders here. Elder Kanyesije. A number of, when you go out there to communities of non-Adventists, they tell you about these men and they tell you about these women. and you ask them of things they did, and they will tell you that they did things that people thought were not existent anymore in human. For example, when you're presented with a very fat deal and you have an opportunity to negotiate a big cut, or you have an opportunity to sneak in some people into a job list, but you decide to do the right thing. He mentioned, it's Dr.
Yes.
Rahire, Professor. Please remind me.
Samson, Dr. Rahira.
Yeah, Dr. Rahire Samson, who is a very, very great man and very innovative. And he mentioned that. And I remembered the journey of young people, where we want to challenge, where we want to own, where we want to come up with great things. But a number of people used to say that you have to lose it a little bit when you are Adventist for you to become. And I think that has been already challenged. You can still become, but still maintain your value. And it's so beautiful when people see someone who has become someone so great, but so humble that they are still godly. It's something very, very profound. And how I challenge young people to still work so hard. A number of you remember Usain Bolt. If you read the story of Usain Bolt's success, of how he made it. And researchers started doing research on how they can raise the fastest men in the world. They started researching about him, and it was found that it was so much about what he eats and what he was eating, and he was always open about it. He said the food was prepared by his mom, and his mom was an Adventist, and the mom was following the health feeding advised in the Bible. So I hope we're in the same line.
Oh, yes.
I've always mentioned about the great men. For all young people here, I know, want to be great. Someone wants to be great in their line, the different line that of desire and dreams. Please read. Every sector, every industry has got an Adventist who has become so big and successful, but still maintained. Read about the Hollywood, and read about Pastor Devon Franklin, the husband to Megan Good, a beautiful woman with a great career in Hollywood, but married to a next year pastor. Devon is always on Facebook when he's shooting on big sets of Hollywood projects, and he's preaching. He's at the Oscars and he's praying. Before the Oscars begin, he goes live and is praying. Devon Franklin is a Seventh Adventist pastor. Please, young people, we have a chance to preach without saying so much. Thank you so much. Along your dreams.
Now, allow me to give another example.
Please.
We have our sister, Deborah Gasana,
Yeah.
who is a human rights activist, actually.
Yes.
I don't know if that's how I can describe Uganda Law Society.
Yes, sir.
Advancing the cause, we know about Legal Aid Project, which offers services for poor Ugandans who need legal services.
Yes.
So as Adventists, we need to be seen to championing the cause for the voiceless people in the community. And that is the only way we can preach without necessarily standing on the podium and saying, love Jesus. Through our services, we can be ambassadors. If we keep our faith so well and we are serving humanity, service to God is not just about preaching. It's not necessarily being employed in the church like some of us are, but in whatever we are doing, we can be doing ministry. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've reminded me of someone that I keep every day saying. A number of you see these people on newspapers, on TV, and we thank you so much because whatever you do we take pride in it, knowing that you're part of us and you're one of us. Thank you so much. And those of you that Elder me here on the panel has not mentioned the name, but you're doing something very, very great. I know the elder here who is doing great in blockchain, crypto business, and is a great influencer. He's over there. Thank you so much. And he upholds the value of our church, which is an open sermon. For those of you viewing and following us on Facebook, I want to thank you so much for doing so. Please, you can leave a comment below on that page, ask a question. We'll come back to you with an answer. We are at SDM Mount Olives, Nalia, with a live audience, a very beautiful church. And I also want to welcome you here every Sabbath. Church is open till evening, and we also have a lunch.